You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing more than a reminder to you that you cannot destroy truth.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought out loud, that thought exists, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions, the Bible, poetry, essays, all kind, all of it an opiate to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs and a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
Yeah? Well, we're gonna have to do something about that. This is RiverWestRadio.com, community-supported radio streaming live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm your host. My name is Michael Wordsworth, and welcome to Breaking Down the News, the show that presents the news highlights of the week, but with a twist. Breaking Down the News is more concerned in bringing you information that wasn't covered on the front pages. Headlines you don't want to miss, because not listening could be dangerous to your freedom, liberty, and health.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
I'm Michael Wordsworth. Welcome to this Wednesday, May 30th edition.
Every day, our senses are being constantly bombarded by subliminal messages that are found in TV, movies, and advertisements. The subliminal messages we are subjected to are unrecognizable by the conscious mind and only recognizable in our subconscious mind. The messages and imagery are passively absorbed and then stored in our subconscious, where propagandists deliberately implant artificial thoughts, which in turn can affect our actions and attitudes later in life. Experiments have shown that less than 1 minute after the viewer begins to watch television, the brain switches from beta-level consciousness, associated with active and logical thought, to alpha level, which is associated with passive acceptance and suggestibility. This is why advertisers spend billions of dollars a year on commercials, as well as product placement within TV shows. Political messages are implanted in fictional TV programs as the relaxed, meditative state of the viewer is receptive to the programming. One example is AMC's Breaking Bad television series, as it depicts a meth villain as a Ron Paul supporter.
I looked him up. It's one of these physicists, one of Hitler's guys, a physicist named Werner Heisenberg. Real cute, huh?
In a basic college-level marketing class, in your first year of radio, television, and film, at least for me, and then I've seen some other textbooks and curriculum and found it's also in those, but most RTF schooling teaches you that they have had subliminals for at least 70 years in the United States and Europe. And so, yes, there is subliminal messaging everywhere. It is all over the place. It's an absolute fact that they flicker it at a rate, and that they have the televisions designed for that rate to bring you into a dreamlike state. I mean, it is a fact that within minutes, you go into a dream brainwave when watching television. Go read a book by the father of modern advertising, Edward Bernays, where he calls you a dumb slave and admits they run your whole life. I've read both his major books. One of them is called Propaganda. Edward Bernays.
The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed Our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we've never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized.
To better understand the current state of modern-day media manipulation, we must first look at the father of propaganda, Edward Bernays. His influence on the 20th century rivaled that of his uncles, Sigmund Freud, as Bernays pioneered the idea of crowd psychology with Freud's psychoanalytical ideas in what would become a new political ideal on how to control the masses. In his 1928 book, Propaganda, Bernays wrote, "If we understand the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it." He called it the engineering of consent and proposed that those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. It was Bernays who introduced the corporate giants to crowd psychology methods and polished techniques to manipulate society. He convinced the population to buy on impulse things they didn't even need by linking mass-produced goods to their own unconscious desires. The tobacco industry hired Bernays to persuade women to take up smoking, and the Alcoa Aluminum Company asked him to drive the campaign for the national fluoridation of our water supply. A consumerist culture was born, and the U.S. government took notice. In addition to famous corporate giants, Bernays also began working for the federal government. They adopted his technique of manufacturing ever-present dangers and then maintaining a constant state of fear to give those in power greater control of what Bernays called the mass mind.
Edward Bernays, who's the father of modern advertising and propaganda. He literally wrote the book, Propaganda. Joseph Goebbels, on record, the Nazi propaganda minister, used a lot of his information and twisted it to his own designs. Bernays was the chief psychological warfare expert for more than 20 years, advising the Department of War. He advised them to call it defense. Don't be honest anymore. Call it the Department of Defense, because you're actually going to run giant imperial slaughter operations.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. And welcome back. This is Wednesday, May 30th, 2012. I'm Michael Wordsworth with Wordsworth Listening To. That was a clip from InfoWars explaining how big science has brainwashed our society. And continuing on that, today's topic is the economic status and condition of our country today. I'm going to start off by saying the human capacity for self-delusion truly is remarkable. Most people out there end up believing exactly what they want to believe, even when the truth is staring at them right in the face. Take the U.S. economy, for example. Barack Obama wants to believe that his policies have worked and that the U.S. economy is improving. So that is what he's telling the American people. The mainstream media wants to believe that Barack Obama is a good president and that his policies make sense. And so they are reporting that we are experiencing an economic recovery. A very large segment of the U.S. population still fully supports Barack Obama, and they want to believe that the economy is getting better. So they're buying the propaganda that the mainstream media is feeding them. But is the U.S. economy really improving? The truth is that it is not. The rate of employment among working-age Americans is exactly where it was 2 years ago, and household incomes have actually gone down while Obama has been president. Home ownership levels and home prices continue to decline. Meanwhile, food and gasoline continue to become even more expensive. The percentage of Americans that are dependent on the government is at an all-time record high, and the U.S. national debt has risen by more than $5 trillion under Obama. We simply have not seen the type of economic recovery that we've seen after every other economic recession since World War II. The horrible statistics about the U.S. economy that you are about to hear are not talked about much by the mainstream media, but they're talked about here on Breaking Down the News on riverwestradio.com. The media would rather be positive and upbeat about the direction that things are headed. But lying to the American people is not going to help them. If you're speeding in a car toward a 500-foot cliff, you don't need someone to cheer you on. Instead, you need someone to slam on those brakes. The cold, hard reality of the matter is that the U.S. economy is in far worse shape than it was 4 or 5 years ago. We have never come close to recovering from the last recession, and another one will be here soon. And keep in mind, I'm not just blaming Barack Obama. George Bush set us up pretty good before him. It's really his policies that led Barack to take it even further. And before Bush, Clinton. Let's not forget, Clinton abolished that Glass-Steagall Act, which did lead us to this derivatives crisis, caused America to have to bail out its largest banks. And why? Because of deregulation in the wrong areas. I'm going to read 25 horrible statistics about the U.S. economy that Barack Obama does not want you to know, and I'm narking them out right now. Number one, the percentage of Americans that own homes is dropping rapidly. According to Gallup, the current level of home ownership in the United States is the lowest the Gallup has ever measured. Home prices in the U.S. continue to fall like a rock as well. They have declined for 6 months in a row are now down at a total of 35% from the peak of the housing bubble. The last time that home prices in the United States were this low was back in 2002. Last year, an astounding 53% of all U.S. college graduates under the age of 25 were either unemployed or underemployed. Back in 2007, about 10% of all unemployed Americans had been out of work for 52 weeks or longer. Today, that number is about 30%. When Barack Obama first became president, the number of long-term unemployed workers in the United States was 2.6 million. Today, it is 5.3 million. The average duration of unemployment in the United States is about 3 times as long as it was back in the year 2000. Despite what the mainstream media would have us believe, the truth is the percentage of working-age Americans that are employed is not increasing. Back in March 2010, 58.5% of all working-age Americans were employed. In March 2012, 58.5% of all working-age Americans barely made it. So how can Barack Obama and the mainstream media claim that the unemployment situation in the United States is getting better? The employment rate is still essentially exactly where it was when the last recession supposedly ended. Here in Wisconsin, I recently heard about new jobs opening up. You're always going to see some improvements in some areas. I'm speaking about the overall situation. The global political financial situation is on a precipice. Of course, we do have jobs in Wisconsin, and you should check wisconsinjobs.com. I just heard about them, and I'm going to follow up on that and bring you more information because I know people out there do need work, obviously. But here, back in 1950, more than 80% of all men in the United States had jobs. Today, less than 65% of all men in the United States have jobs. In 1962, 28% of all jobs in America were manufacturing jobs. In 2011, only 9% were actually manufacturing jobs. In some areas of Detroit, Michigan, you can buy a 3-bedroom home for just $500. Well, heck, you could buy a house in Milwaukee for $1 going back to the 70s, but that's another situation. We were having our own housing problems here. But a 3-bedroom house for $500, I'll take it. According to one recent survey, approximately 1/3 of all Americans are not paying their bills on time at this point. Now, I have to say I'm one of them. I get them paid, but sometimes it's just not on time. How about you? If you agree or disagree, please feel free to call in. The number is 414-935-2951. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Would love to hear about your evaluation of the present economy. I'd love to hear about your struggles in the job market. And how are you doing paying your bills? Are you a college student? Well, the student loan debt bubble continues to expand at a very frightening pace. Recently, it was announced that total student loan debt in the United States has passed the $1 trillion mark. Ouch. It's not good. Incredibly, one out of every 4 jobs in the United States pays $10 an hour or less at that point. Believe me, I know. I've been checking, and ouch, I can't get paid more these days. Household incomes all over the United States continue to fall. Well, no kidding. After adjusting for inflation, median household income in America has declined by 7.8% just since December 2007. Over the past several decades, government dependence has risen to unprecedented heights in the United States. Here's the following is how I describe the explosive growth of social welfare benefits in one swift move. Back in 1960, social welfare benefits made up approximately 10% of all salaries and wages. In the year 2000, social welfare benefits made up approximately 21% of all salaries and wages. That's a 100% increase. Today, social welfare benefits make up approximately 35% of all salaries and wages. I don't know how long we can sustain that, folks. In November 2008, 30.8 million Americans were on food stamps. That might be hard to believe, but that's nothing because today more than 46 million Americans are on food stamps, and you have 1 million homeless children on the streets. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, today 49% of all Americans live in a home that receives some form of benefits from the federal government. Oh my, how we're becoming so much like the Soviet communist state Russia. Over the next 75 years, Medicaid is facing unfunded liabilities. Unfunded liabilities mean money they owe but won't pay until the future, some future date. Well, these unfunded liabilities equal now for Medicare more than $38 trillion. I mean, $15 trillion is the official debt that they tell you. When you add these unfunded liabilities, it racks up. It's way beyond that. I mean, $38 trillion, that comes to $328,404 for each and every household in the United States. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You got a lot more paid. And one day they're going to hand this debt to us. I'm telling you, as I tell my audience all the time, don't sign on to it. We need to be like Iceland. We need to tell the offshore bankers to go jump in the sea, or at least go back to where they came from. Oh, during the first quarter of 2012, U.S. public debt rose by $359.1 billion. U.S. GDP only rose by $142.4 billion. It's half. At this point, the U.S. national debt is rising by more than $2 million every single minute. And keep in mind, that does not include the unfunded liabilities, nor all the derivatives that are sitting unexposed at this point. The U.S. national debt is rising by more than $2 million every single minute. I mean, do you have something to say about that? Please call in 414-935-2951. Let your voice be heard. This is a worldwide broadcast breaking down the news. I'm Michael Wordsworth. The U.S. national debt, it has risen by more than $5 trillion since the day Barack Obama first took office. In a little more than 3 years, Obama has added more to the national debt than the first 41 presidents combined. I thought Bush was bad. I thought he was a communist, at least a socialist. You know what Stalin said? Communism is socialism in a hurry. And they both lead to a totalitarian nanny state with military police standing on your street asking you for your papers. It's already happening today, America. The Federal Reserve continues to systematically destroy the value of the U.S. dollar. Does that sound strange? I mean, as far as you know, they put out and hold the dollars. No, their policies are destroying the value of the dollar. Since 1970, the U.S. dollar has lost more than 83% of its value. Since 1970. Since 1964, you could buy a gallon of gasoline for a quarter. Now, today, it's around $4. Do the math. You got an 8-fold increase there. But the horrible economic statistics only tell part of the story. In communities all over America, there's a feeling that something fundamental has changed. Businesses that have been around for generations are shutting their doors, and there is a lot of fear in the air. The following is an excerpt from a recent interview with Richard Yamarone, the senior economist at Bloomberg Brief. He said, "You have to listen to what the small businesses are telling you, and right now they are telling you, hey, I'm the head of a third or fourth generation, 75 or 100-year-old businesses, and I've got to shut the doors or I've got to let people go. And if I'm hiring anybody back, it's only on a temporary basis." Sometimes they do this, though. Sometimes they hire through a hiring firm so that they can sidestep paying unemployment benefit insurance. That's no good for you. So that's what's really going on at the grassroots level of the economy. Very, very grossly different from what you're seeing in some of these numbers coming out in earnings releases. All over the country, millions of hardworking Americans are desperately looking for work. They have been told the recession is over, but they are still finding it incredibly difficult to find anyone that will hire them. The following example is from a recent CNN article. Joanne Cotton, a 54-year-old Columbus, Mississippi resident, was one of those faces of poverty. Unemployed for 3 years, Joanne has gone from making $60,000 a year to less than 15 G's overnight. Her husband is disabled and dependent on the medicines the couple can no longer afford. They rely on food stamps, which Joanne says is, quote, depressing as hell, end quote. Receiving government aid, however, has not been as depressing as her job search. Joanne says she has applied for at least 300 jobs. Even though she can barely afford gas, she drives to the interviews only to learn that the employers want to hire younger candidates at low wages. The experiences have taken a toll. Quote, I've aged 10 years in the 3 years that I've been looking for a job, Joanne told us. I wanted to get a job so I could just relax and exhale, but I can't. After a while, you just give up. Well, don't give up, people. You got to keep hope alive. I'm telling you, there's many days I felt like giving up, and it was just a matter of getting through that day to see what new opportunity would come forward. And they do, but you got to hold on. There's not always a rainbow at the end of the storm. A lot of people are still sitting without work, and it is depressing, but what are you going to do? I mean, if you're that broke, you can at least pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on. Make your voice heard. Get active. Stop what's going on. But you got to know how to stop because you got to know what the issues are. Meanwhile, Barack Obama and his family continue to live the high life at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer. That's nothing new. I mean, we've heard it before, but it seems kind of insulting. I mean, to lie to us to say that the economy is getting better and then to pretend like, oh, the money's just flowing. Remember, that's your tax dollars that they live off of. The government doesn't have money of its own. It just doesn't. Is it unbelievable? You say they print the money? Yeah, but it's not actual capital until you go and work for it. Even many Democrats are starting to get very upset about this. Here's an excerpt from a recent article by Paul Bedard. He states, blue-collar Democratic voters stuck taking depressing staycations. A staycation is where you just stay home. You take the day off or the week off, but you do your laundry, cut the yard, and hang out in the same community you've been hanging out all winter. Well, they're having staycations because they can't afford gas and hotels, are resentful of the first family's 17 lavish vacations around the world, and don't want their tax dollars paying for Obama's holidays, according to a new analysis of swing voters. It is simply not appropriate for the Obamas to be spending millions upon millions upon millions of U.S. tax dollars on luxury vacations when so many Americans are deeply suffering. But Barack Obama does not want you to know about any of this stuff. I mean, personally, Barack Obama's a teleprompting reading puppet that's hired and managed by the global mega corporations and the foreign interest of central banks. Obama just wants you to buy his empty propaganda one more time so that he can continue to occupy the White House for another 4 years. I'm telling you, it's amazing. The economy, it's a big lie. It's a lot like Hitler reporting back to Germany, we're winning the war. I'm telling you, we're not winning the war. I'm Michael Wordsworth. The number to call is 414-935-2951. We're going to take a little break. Right back in a minute.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
The decision is evident. We are being manipulated. Our entire economic condition is a staged event designed specifically to lower wages and the median income of Americans all over the country through a gradual process. Many of you stay informed. Many of you don't understand the banking situation in its details. But here we have a clip of a 12-year-old Canadian girl, Victoria Grant, an incredible little girl, 12 years old, whose explanation of our financial system and the cause of our financial crisis is remarkable. Come on, folks. If she can understand it, why couldn't you? I'm going to play this clip, and you just listen to the wisdom and intelligence of this 12-year-old girl. It is freaking amazing.
Have you ever wondered why Canada is in debt? Have you ever wondered why the government forces Canadians to pay so many taxes? Have you ever wondered why the bankers from the largest private banks are becoming wealthier and the rest of us are not? Have you ever wondered why the gross national debt is over $800 billion? Or why we are spending $160 million a day on the interest of the national debt? That's $60 billion a year. Have you ever wondered who receives the $60 billion? What I have discovered is the banks and the government have colluded to financially enslave the people of Canada. I will share with you 3 important points of reference which will hopefully spark enough interest and concern for you to continue the research on your own and to engage your government to stop this criminal act against the people of Canada. First, we will briefly examine the Bank of Canada. Second, we will see how our banking system works today. And lastly, I will offer a viable solution that we can petition our government to implement. A very little known figure in Canadian history is J.L. Gradon McGeer. He was a lawyer, member of Parliament, and mayor of Vancouver. His contribution to Canada is probably the greatest in our history. He championed the creation of the National Bank of Canada, whose sole purpose is to create and manage Canada's money. It was formed on July 3, 1934, and owned by all Canadians. Until the 1970s, because of the Bank of Canada, Canada's national debt was held at a constant, manageable level, until the government decided to implement what we now have as our modern-day banking system that is robbing the Canadian people. So how are they robbing us? Allow me to explain how our private banks and government work today. First, the Canadian government borrows money from the private banks. They then lend the debt-based money to Canada with compounded interest. The government then continues to increase taxation of Canadians year after year in order to pay back the interest on the exponentially growing national debt. What results is inflation, less real money for Canadians to spend into our economy, and the real money being used to pad the pockets of the banks. Also, the government gave the banks the ability to loan out money that doesn't exist in the form of loans. When a bank gives you a mortgage, which literally means a death pledge, or a loan, they don't actually give you money. They click a key on a computer and generate the fake money out of thin air. They don't actually have it in their bank vaults. Presently, the banks only have $4 billion on reserve, but they have loaned out over $1.5 trillion. To quote Graham Towers, each and every time a bank makes a loan, a new bank credit is created. New deposits, brand new money. Broadly speaking, all new money comes out of a bank in the form of loans. As loans are debt, then under the present system, all money is debt. What I find interesting is even Jesus in Matthew 21 drove out the money changers in the temple because they were manipulating the currency to steal money from the people. The private banks are just like the money changers in Matthew 21. They are defrauding and robbing the people of Canada, thus their freedom, and they need to be stopped. How should the banking system work? In an infamous interview, Mr. McGeer asked Mr. Towers, "Can you tell me why a government with power to create money should give that power away to a private monopoly and then borrow that which Parliament can create itself back at interest to the point of national bankruptcy?" Mr. Towers replied, "If Parliament wants to change the form of operating the banking system, then certainly that is within the powers of Parliament. In other words, if the Canadian government needs money, they can borrow it directly from the Bank of Canada. The people would then pay fair taxes to repay the Bank of Canada. This tax money would in turn get injected back into our economic infrastructure and the debt would be wiped out. Canadians would again prosper with real money as the foundation of our economic structure and not debt money. Regarding the debt money owed to the private banks, such as the Royal Bank, we would simply have the Bank of Canada print the money owing, hand it over to the private banks, and then clear the debt with the Bank of Canada. And yes, we have the power and lawful right to do so. In conclusion, it has become painfully obvious, even for me, a 12-year-old Canadian, that we are being defrauded and robbed by the banking system and a complicit government. What will we do to stop this crime? What will we do to ensure that the next generation will live free and clear of the debt-based economy that enslaves them to the banks? Margaret Mead said the following, and I hope that all of you remember this. "Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Thank you.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
And we're back. This is Breaking Down the News, RiverWestRadio.com. I am Michael Wordsworth, and these are words worth listening to. This article from Michael Snyder, TheEconomicCollapse.com, on Wednesday, May 16th. The bank runs in Greece will soon be followed by bank runs in other European nations. The bank runs that were happening in Greece last week, the ones that we are watching right now, are shocking, but they are only just the beginning. Since May 6th, nearly $1 billion has been withdrawn from Greek banks. For a small nation like Greece, that is an absolutely catastrophic number. At this point, the entire Greek banking system is in danger of collapsing. If you had money in a Greek bank, why wouldn't you pull it out? If Greece leaves the euro, all euros in Greek banks will be likely converted to drachmas, and the value of those drachmas will almost certainly decline dramatically. In fact, it has been estimated that the Greek citizens could see the value of their bank accounts decline by up to 50% if Greece leaves the euro. So if you had money in a Greek bank, it would only make sense to withdraw it and move it to another country as quickly as possible, and the Eurozone begins to unravel. This is a scenario that we are going to see play out in country after country. As member nations leave the Eurozone, you would be a fool to have your euros in Italian banks or Spanish banks when you could have them in German banks instead. So the bank runs that are happening in Greece right now are only a preview of things to come. Before this crisis is over, we are going to see bank runs happening all over Europe. If Greece leaves the euro, the consequences are likely to be quite messy. Those that are promoting the idea that a Greek exit can be done in an orderly fashion are not being particularly honest. The following is a recent article in The Independent. Quote, "Whoever tells you a Greek exit would be no big deal is an idiot. Lying or disingenuous," said Tony Kapoor of the European think tank Redefine. Economists fear that a disorderly exit would prompt a huge run by investors on Spanish and Italian debt, forcing those countries to seek support from an EU bailout fund, which, with a capacity of just $500 billion, is widely regarded as too small to cope with those pressures. A Greek exit from the euro would not only result in a run on Spanish and Italian bonds, but it would also likely result in a run on Spanish and Italian banks. If Greece is allowed to leave the euro, that will be a signal that other countries will eventually be allowed to leave as well. Nobody gets out alive here, buddy. Nobody in their right minds would want their euros stuck in Spanish or Italian banks if those countries end up converting back to national currencies. Fear is a powerful motivator. If Greece converts their euros back to drachmas, that will be a clear signal that all euros are not created equally. The race to move money into German banks will accelerate dramatically, and a Greek exit from the euro is looking more and more likely with each passing day. Even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is now admitting that it is a very real possibility. According to Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, warned she was, quote, technically prepared for anything, end quote, and said the utmost effort must be made to ensure any Greek exit was orderly. It's like screaming fire in a theater. It's not going to happen orderly. The effect was likely to be quite messy with risks to growth, trade, and financial markets. It is something that would be extremely expensive and would pose great risk, but it's part of options that we must technically consider, said Christine Lagarde. Meanwhile, banks in other troubled European nations are already on shaky ground. The Spanish banking system is an absolute disaster zone. And at this point, on Monday night, Moody's downgraded the credit ratings of 26 Italian banks. The situation in Italy is especially worth keeping a close eye on, though. As Ambrose Evans Pritchard recently noted, things are not looking good for Italy at all. They quote, Italy's former premier Romano Prodi said the EU risks instant contagion to Spain, Italy, and France if Greece leaves. Quote, the whole house of cards will come down, he said. Angela Drusiani from Banca Albertini said the only way to avert catastrophe is to convert the European Central Bank into a lender of last resort. Otherwise, Italy faces massive devaluation, 3 to 5 years of hyperinflation, and unbearable unemployment. So what can be done about any of this? Well, there is actually a lot that could be done if politicians in Europe were willing to think outside the established global financial paradigm. The truth is that Greece could solve their current financial problems in 4 easy steps. They would have to be willing to stick it to the rest of Europe and to risk being blackballed by the international community, but it could be done. The following is a prescription for saving Greece. 1. Default on all debts. 2. Leave the euro. 3. Issue drachmas that are debt-free and that do not have to come from a central bank. Instead, have the Greek government create them and spend them directly into circulation. And number 4, enjoy a return to prosperity. In such a scenario, the Greek national debt would no longer be a problem. The Greek government would never have to borrow any more money, and austerity would be no longer needed. Yes, inflation would be an issue with the new currency, but a bit of inflation would be a walk in the park compared to the horrible economic depression that Greece is experiencing right now. And once the Greek economy was growing again, it would certainly be possible for them to make the transition to hard money if they wanted to. It is imperative that we all understand that just because the global financial system works a certain way today does not mean that it must always work that way. If you have a few minutes, I want you to watch an incredible speech by a 12-year-old Canadian girl named Victoria Grant. We just played it a second ago. In this 6-minute speech, she details how the bankers are defrauding the people of Canada and how the Canadian government does not actually need to borrow a single penny from the bankers. It's good advice for them, it's good advice for Greece, and it's good advice for America. If a 12-year-old girl can figure this out, then why can't the rest of us? Sadly, the financial world still seems enamored with the corrupt central banking system that has gotten us into this mess. In fact, one recent poll found that the Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Throw the Money Out of the Helicopter Bernanke, has a 75% approval rating from global investors. Right now, America is going down the same path as Greece, Spain, and Italy. Eventually, we will hit a wall, and our financial system will fall apart. We need the American people to understand that the Federal Reserve System is a perpetual debt machine. The U.S. national debt is now more than 5,000 times larger than it was when the Fed was first created back in 1913. It is at the very core of our national financial problems. When will people wake up and realize that central banking is the problem and not the solution? When will people wake up and realize the national governments do not have to go into debt to anyone if they don't want to? In our world today, there is far more debt than there is money. It is a system that will inevitably crash, but there are other alternatives. Unfortunately, politicians all over the globe continue to want to be married to our current debt-based financial system. As a result, we will suffer the consequences of that system. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Back in a minute. Turn out the lights. The largest U.S. cities are becoming cesspools of filth and decay. Once upon a time, the largest U.S. cities were the envy of the entire world. Sadly, that is no longer the case. Sure, there are areas of New York City, Boston, Washington, and Los Angeles that are still absolutely beautiful, but for the most part, our major cities are rapidly rotting and decaying. Cities such as Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, Memphis, New Orleans, St. Louis, and Oakland were all once places where middle-class American workers thrived and raised their families. Today, all of those cities are rapidly being transformed into cesspools of filth, decay, and wretchedness. Millions of good jobs have left our major cities in recent decades, and poverty has absolutely exploded. Basically, you can turn out the lights because the party is over. In fact, some major U.S. cities are literally turning out the lights. In Detroit, about 40% of the streetlights are already broken, and the city cannot afford to repair them. So Mayor Bing has come up with a plan to cut the number of operating streetlights almost in half and leave vast sections of the city totally in the dark at night. I wonder what that will do to the criminal rate in the city. Think it'll increase? But don't look down on Detroit too much, because what is happening in Detroit will be happening where you live soon enough. A recent Bloomberg article described Mayor Bing's plan to eliminate nearly half of Detroit's streetlights. Detroit, whose 139 square miles contained 60% fewer residents than in 1950, will try to nudge them into a smaller living space by eliminating almost half of its streetlights. It is 40% of the 88,000 streetlights are broken, and the city, whose finances are to be overseen by an appointed board, can't afford to fix them. Mayor Dave Bing's plan would create an authority to borrow $160 million to upgrade and reduce the number of streetlights to 46,000. Maintenance would be contracted out, saving the city $10 million a year. What this means is that there are going to be a lot of neighborhoods that will have the lights turned off permanently. So which neighborhoods will those be? According to one top Detroit official, distressed areas are going to be on the low end of the totem pole. Quote, "You have to identify those neighborhoods where you want to concentrate your population," said Chris Brown, Detroit's chief operating officer. He says, "We're not going to light distressed areas like we have in other areas." City officials know that they cannot force people to move from distressed areas, so they're going to encourage them to leave by cutting off services. But turning off the lights is not the only way that Detroit is trying to save money. Recently, officials in Detroit announced that all police stations in the city will be closed to the public for 16 hours a day. Wow. It is so sad to see what is happening to what was once such a great city. Back in the old days, Detroit had a teeming middle-class population. Today, 53.6% of all children in the city of Detroit are living in poverty. Back in the old days, Detroit was a shining example of what America was doing right. Today, 47% of all people living in the city of Detroit are functionally illiterate. Back in the old days, things were much better. Middle-class neighborhoods sprouted like mushrooms all over Detroit. Today, the median price of a home in Detroit is now just $6,000. Needless to say, crime is exploding in Detroit, and many families live in constant fear. Many have taken justice into their own hands. Justifiable homicide in Detroit rose by a staggering 79% during 2011. Ouch. I'd hate to see that happen in Milwaukee. I mean, people would be going crazy. But Detroit is only one example of a national trend. For example, a recent article by Jim Quinn entitled, quote, "More than 30 blocks of gray and decay" described the filth and decay and wretchedness in West Philadelphia. In West Philadelphia, can you believe that? Quinn refers to the drive-through this area as the 30 blocks of squalor. The real unemployment rate exceeds 50%. Murder is the #1 industry, with drugs a close second. As you drive down the 30 blocks of squalor, you meet the ghost of squalor future. For Westchester Pike, the population along this corridor is ignorant, dependent, and represents the dregs of our society. But this area was once home to middle-class families. There were once many beautiful homes in West Philly, but most of them now are either gone or are crumbling badly. According to Quinn, the physical decay is matched by the social decay. The once proud homes are in shambles. Bags of garbage dot the landscape. Most of the people who live here are parasites on society. Personal responsibility, work ethic, education, and marriage are unknown concepts in this community. Talking about West Philly here. Even though more than 50% of the students in West Philly drop out of the high school, and the SAT scores of West Philly are lower than they're so low they can play handball off the curb. The bankrupt school district spent $70 million to build a new high school prison to babysit derelicts and future prison inmates. A prison economy. The windows do not have steel bars yet, as the architect was smart to put all windows at least 8 feet above street level. One of the great things about the article is that Quinn pointed out how the retail stores in the area reflect the things that the population of the community truly values. The Chestnut Plaza truly represents what is important to this community. This squalor center, as opposed to Power Center, includes a video porn store, cash checking, payday loan outlet, smoke shop, donut shop, laundromat, and liquor store. Sound familiar? That's right. Gun shops, liquor stores, and pawn shops, huh? No need for a wedding ring store or a resume writing service. Sadly, there are communities like this all over the country. As I mentioned recently, the entire state of California is slowly being transformed into one gigantic cesspool wasteland. Yes, there are still a few areas where the wealthy play that are absolutely beautiful. If you stay in the wealthy enclaves, you might never even know that the rest of the state is badly decaying. There are really good reasons why millions of people are moving out of California. For example, a reader named Peter left the following comment. I am a native Californian, 61 years old, and have lived here all but 2 years of my life. I can tell you absolutely that this state is not what it was 30 years ago. Cities like San Francisco have gone from being world-class tourist attractions to national disgraces. Los Angeles is a third-world city. San Diego is bankrupt. Even Silicon Valley, despite the recent improvements, is no way what it was back in the 90s. The retail trade is all but dead in this state. He's talking about California. Even high-end malls like Rodeo Drive and Ocean Avenue and Carmel are full of vacancies. Throughout the state, good businesses are shutting down and hardworking families are selling their homes. The void is being created is being filled by crime and gangs. The following is a comment that a reader named Roberta left on that same article. Yep, we live in Oroville, California back in 2007, and it was just starting to get bad then. Montgomery Ward's closed, then McMahon's Furniture closed, and now McDonald's is closing this July, along with a grand slam of well-known businesses, all folding and pulling out of the Orwell or folding lock, stock, and barrel. It's turning into a gang town with widespread rampant drug use. I feel sorry for family and friends that are still there clinging to the hope that things will get better, but I don't think so, she says. Perhaps things are still quite good where you live. Perhaps you think that you will be immune from all this. Sadly, the truth is, this is just the beginning. The U.S. economy is actually performing much better than it should be, thanks to the trillions of borrowed dollars that Barack Obama and the U.S. Congress have been spending into the economy. When our debt-fueled prosperity ends, however, a lot more cities are going to end up looking just like Detroit. America cannot prosper without middle-class jobs, and those kind of jobs are just rapidly disappearing. We cannot solve a debt crisis by piling on more debt. Somebody has to work, earn, and pay it back. Just this week, Hewlett-Packard announced that it's going to lay off 27,000 workers. We are losing middle-class jobs at a time when we desperately need more of them. Last year, 53% of all Americans were with a bachelor's degree under the age of 25 were either unemployed or underemployed. Yet, our politicians continue to pursue the same foolish policies over and over. So, things are going to continue to get worse, and America is going to continue to descend into squalor. You better get ready, folks. It's coming. The facts are out there. The media masters spin their lies out in the open, but you have to look and you have to listen. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Welcome to Breaking Down the News. Here's a clip from 2008. It appeared on C-SPAN. I want you to listen to this hearing from the House Financial Services back in 2008. William Black is called before making a testimony, and he explains the situation bluntly. But who listened? Hopefully you're out there today and you are listening. This is William Black at the House Financial Service Committee in the Rayburn office building. It appeared on C-SPAN 3 back in 2008. Let's listen.
And now we'll hear from Mr. William K. Black, Associate Professor of Economics and Law, the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Law. Mr. Black.
Committee, thank you. You asked earlier for a stern regulator. You have one now in front of you. And we need to be blunt. And you haven't heard much bluntness in hours of testimony. We stopped a non-prime crisis before it became a crisis in 1991 by supervisory actions. We did it so effectively that people have forgotten it even existed, even though it caused several $100 million in losses, but none to the taxpayers. We did it by preemptive litigation and by supervision. We broke a raging epidemic of accounting control fraud without new legislation in the period 1984 through 1986. Legislation would have been helpful. We sought legislation, but we didn't get it. And we were able to stop that because we didn't simply continue business as usual. Lehman's failure is a story in large part of fraud. And it is fraud that begins at the absolute latest in 2001. And that is with their subprime and their liar's loan operation. Lehman was the leading purveyor of liar's loans in the world for most of this decade. Studies on liar's loans show incidence of fraud of 90%. Lehman sold this to the world with reps and warranties that there were no such frauds. If you want to know why we have a global crisis, in large part, it is before you, but it hasn't been discussed today, amazingly. Financial institution leaders are not engaged in risk when they engage in liar's loans. Liar's loans will cause a failure. They lose money. The only way to make money is to deceive others by selling bad paper, and that will eventually lead to liability and failure as well. When people cheat, you cannot, as a regulator, continue business as usual. They go into a different category, and you must act completely differently as a regulator. When we've gotten and said sad excuses, the SEC, we're told there are only 24 people in their comprehensive program. Who decided how many people there would be in their comprehensive program? Who decided the staffing? The SEC did. To say that we only had 24 people is not to create an excuse, it's to give an admission of criminal negligence, except it's not criminal because you're a federal employee. In the context of the FDIC, Secretary Geithner testified today that this event pushed the financial system to the brink of collapse. But Chairman Bernanke testified we sent 2 people to be on site at Lehman. We sent 50 credit people to the largest savings and loan in America. It had $30 billion in assets. We had a whole lot less staff than the Fed does. We forced out the CEO. We replaced the CEO, and we did that not through regulation, but because of our leverage as creditors. Now, I ask you, who had more leverage as creditors in 2008? The Fed compared to the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco 19 years earlier? Incomprehensible greater leverage in the Fed, and it simply was not used. And we've heard it. So let's start with the repos. We have known since Enron in 2001 that this is a common scam in which every major bank that was approached by Enron agreed to help them deceive creditors and investors by doing these kind of transactions. And so what happened? There was a proposal in 2004 to stop it. And the regulatory heads, it was an interagency effort, killed it. They came out with something pathetic in 2006 and stalled its implementation to 2007, but it's meaningless. We have known for a decade that these are frauds. We have known for a decade how to stop them. All of the major regulatory agencies were complicit in that statement in destroying it. We have a self-fulfilling policy of regulatory failure because of the leadership in this era. We have the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, finding that this is 3-card Monte. Well, what would you do as a regulator if you knew that one of the largest enterprises in the world, when the nation is on the brink of collapse, economic collapse, is engaged in fraud, 3-card Monte? Would you continue business as usual? That's what was done. Oh, they met a lot. They say that we only had a nuclear stick. Sounds pretty good stick to use if you're on the brink of collapse of the system. But that's not what the Fed has to do. The Fed is a central bank. Central banks for centuries have gotten rid of the heads of financial institutions. The Bank of England does it with a luncheon. The board of directors are invited. They don't say no. They are sat down. The head of the Bank of England says, "We have lost confidence in the CEO of your enterprise. We believe that Mr. Jones would be an effective replacement." And by 4 o'clock that day, Mr. Jones is running the place. And he has a mandate to clean up all the problems. Instead, every day that Lehman remained under its leadership, the exposure of the American people to loss grew by hundreds of millions of dollars on average. Aurora was pumping out up to $3 billion a month in liar's loans. Losses on those are running roughly 50% to 85 cents on the dollar. It is critical not to do business as usual, to change. We've also heard from Secretary Geithner and Chairman Bernanke, we couldn't deal with these lenders because we had no authority over them. The Fed had unique authority since 1994 under HOEPA to regulate all mortgage lenders. It finally used it in 2008. They could have stopped Aurora. They could have stopped the subprime unit of Lehman that was really a liar's loan place as well as time went by. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. And now our last witness, I probably should reiterate.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. How can the American people ever trust Congress again after learning of the rampant insider trading that has been going on? I'm Michael Wordsworth with Wordsworth Listening To. Will the shocking insider trading revelations that have come to light in recent days finally be enough to motivate the American people to start throwing all the con men and charlatans out of Congress? On Sunday, 60 Minutes opened up a huge can of worms when it did a feature story on insider trading by members of Congress. Up until now, the vast majority of Americans had no idea that insider trading was actually legal for members of Congress. In fact, as will be documented later, members of Congress have been using secrets that they learned during the course of their duties to make huge amounts of money in the stock market. If you can believe it, during the financial crisis of 2008, some members of Congress were making huge stock moves that would only pay off if the stock market crashed really hard at a time when they should have been focusing on creating legislation that would help the U.S. financial system survive. It is hard not to feel sick after learning how low some of our leaders, quote, leaders, have stooped to enrich themselves. Now that the American people are learning the truth, how can they ever trust Congress again? Even before these revelations about insider trading by members of Congress came to light, the approval rating for Congress was sitting at about 11%. There is a widespread feeling in this country that our political system simply does not work any longer. Nearly all of our leaders seem to be wealthy elitists that are rapidly becoming wealthier. Today, the average net worth worth for a member of Congress is approximately $3.8 million, and the collective net worth of all the members of Congress increased by 25% between 2008 and 2010. How was your income? Did you increase by 25%? It would be one thing. It would be one thing if they were accumulating all this wealth legitimately. However, it is not right for members of Congress to use government secrets and inside information that is not available to the general public to make huge profits in the stock market. In any of the rest of the U.S. engaged in insider trading, they could throw us in jail. You can't remember Martha Stewart? Yeah, they threw her in. When John Corzine ripped off $2 billion of customer funds, although that wasn't an insider trading deal, it was related, he bet that Europe's bonds would hold out through the year. They didn't, and that cost a lot of people money. But as a recent CNBC article noted, members of Congress can pretty much get away with it as much as they want to. Listen to this quote from CNBC. When you buy and sell stocks based on secrets you learned at the office, it could be insider trading. But when a United States senator does it, it's probably perfectly legal. That's because the SEC, which is the Security Exchange Commission, has largely determined that trading stocks based on advanced knowledge of action in Congress is not insider trading. But just because it is legal, that does not make it right. Former Washington lobbyist Jack Abramoff made headlines recently when he claimed that, quote, a dozen members of Congress and their aides took part in insider trading. Well, it turns out that there has been a whole lot more insider trading going on than that. If you have not seen the recent 60 Minutes report on this issue yet, you really should take a few minutes and watch it. You can find it at cbsnews.com. One of the politicians featured in the 60 Minute stories was Nancy Pelosi. Everybody basically knows her. Pelosi has been doing incredibly well financially in recent years. For example, her net worth soared by 62% in 2010. If you can believe it, Nancy Pelosi is now worth $35.2 million. That's a nice chunk of change. So has she been getting a little bit of extra help along the way? According to another recent CNN article, one very preferential stock deal involving a credit card company went very well for her. It also turns out that there was credit card legislation that was pending in the House at the time. CNN states Pelosi and her husband participated in an initial public offering of Visa in 2008. According to CBS, they bought 5,000 shares at the initial price of $44 each. 2 days later, shares were trading at $64, CBS said. The network reported the investment came at a time when a piece of legislation that was opposed by credit card companies was making its way through the House. That's insider trading. That's worse than insider trading. The reason why they can't do it is they can actually make legislation that affects the markets. But what is even worse is what many members of Congress did with secret information that they were told by U.S. Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke at the start of the financial crisis of 2008. On September 16, 2008, Paulson and Bernanke held closed-door meetings. You're not allowed to see it. No transparency. With members of Congress and warned them that the financial system was about to totally collapse. But instead of racing out to save the financial system, author Peter Schweitzer says that many of our representatives in Congress raced out to save their stock portfolios. In his new book, Schweitzer alleges the following. Schweitzer says that the U.S. Senator Dick Durbin sold $74,715 worth of stock on September 17th and $42,000 worth of stock on September 18th. Schweitzer says that U.S. Representative Jim Moran sold off shares in 90 different corporations on September 17th. Wow. Schweitzer says that U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse sold off at least $250,000 worth of stock between September 18th and September 24th. Schweitzer also says that U.S. Representative Spencer Baucus bet very heavily against the stock market in the days following the September 16th meeting and made tens of thousands of dollars doing so. Schweitzer says that the U.S. Senator John Kerry bought up approximately $350,000 of Bank of America stock and approximately another $500,000 of Citigroup stock during October 2008 and November 2008. It was during this period that the bailout programs for the big banks were being developed and debated. Are you feeling sick to your stomach yet? But it isn't just members of Congress that are using secrets to make money in the stock market. According to an article in the Wall Street Journal, quite a few congressional staffers have also been making questionable trades. Quote, at least 72 aides on both sides of the aisle traded shares of companies that their bosses help oversee, according to a Wall Street Journal analysis of more than 3,000 disclosure forms covering trading activity by Capitol Hill staffers for 2008 and 2009. But nobody is getting into trouble for any of this. This is how corrupt our system has become. And there are scientific studies that show that members of Congress have been doing significantly better in the stock market than the general public has been doing. For example, one study from 2004 found that members of Congress do even better in the stock market than corporate insiders do. Here's the quote. A 2004 study of the results of stock traded by United States senators during the 1990s found that senators on average beat the market by 12% a year. In sharp contrast, U.S. households on average underperformed the market by 1.4% a year, and even corporate insiders on average beat the market by only about 6% a year during that period. A reasonable inference is that some senators had access to and were using material, non-public information about the companies and whose stocks they trade. Another article from CNBC mentioned a study that found investments by members of the U.S. House of Representatives also beat the market by about 6% a year. I guess if you're in Congress, you get 14%, and the House of Representatives, they only get 6%. Abnormal returns for the common stock investments of members of the U.S. House of Representatives. 4 university professors found that a portfolio that mimics the purchases of House members beats the market by 55 basis points per month, or approximately 6% annually. That study looked at 16,000 common stock transactions made by approximately 300 House delegates from 1995 to 2001. Clearly, all of this is not just some huge coincidence. So why doesn't Congress just pass a law to make it illegal for members of Congress to make trades based on insider information? Well, a few members of Congress have actually tried to introduce such legislation, but it has never gone anywhere. I wonder why. It turns out that members of Congress like things just the way they are. Being a member of Congress is one of the best jobs in the country. It is a great way to become famous, get rich, and live the high life. As mentioned earlier, only 11% of the American people think that Congress is doing a good job, and yet we keep sending the same people back to Congress time after time. Since 1964, the re-election rate for members of the U.S. House of Representatives has never fallen below 85%. Yes, our system is a joke, but the joke is on us. So do any of you out there actually believe that we have a chance of changing this deeply corrupt system? Please feel free to call in. The number is 414-935-2951. We're headed up to the top of the hour. It's Wednesday at 4:44 p.m. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Back after this short break. In Chantilly, Virginia this week, the building Bilderberg meetings are taking place. The Bilderberg meetings? They are a secret cabal of the world's leading politicians and business owners, and they are meeting in Chantilly, Virginia this week to decide your fate and the fate of other countries throughout the world. But it doesn't end there. They are deliberately contaminating U.S. water supply with herbicide. This report from Aaron Dykes on Infowars.com from May 29th, 2012. GMO firm Syngenta allegedly tainted the water supply of 52 million with hormonally disruptive chemical atrazine. The Swiss-based GMO company Syngenta settled a class action lawsuit for some $105 million over the dangers posed by its gender-bending herbicide atrazine. Water utilities in the U.S. Midwest sued over alleged contamination resulting from Syngenta's weed killer atrazine, which leaked into systems that potentially affected the drinking supply of some 52 million Americans in more than 2,000 water districts, according to the Wall Street Journal. Atrazine, used as a herbicide by half of American corn growers, is banned in Europe and linked to disrupting sexual reproduction in frogs, with some studies also linked to reproductive problems in humans. However, Syngenta maintains that atrazine is safe and admitted no liability in its lawsuit settlement. They quote, "No one ever has or could be exposed to enough atrazine in water to affect their health." A statement from the company claimed, perhaps ludicrously. Competitor to Monsanto, Syngenta's CEO Martin Taylor, and former Barclays Bank CEO, is frequently and typically annual attendee at the Bilderberg conferences. The EPA, for its part, has refused to ban atrazine, but has looked at its potential dangers and claims a robust regulation process that keeps America safe. However, a closer look at regulatory agencies, including the FDA, EPA, and USDA, has demonstrated dangerous and uncomfortable dominance from biotech industry lobbyists. For instance, former Monsanto's vice president and lobbyist Michael R. Taylor is the classic example of revolving door corruption, with a top post at the FDA and a role in writing regulatory policies which invariably favor biotech interests. This is yet another alarm bell warning to us to proceed with grave caution with biotech rather than rolling out the proverbial red carpet for industry to dominate our lives, economy, and environment in spite of all known risks. Bilderberg 2012 convenes May 31st in Chantilly, Virginia. An effort to occupy the clandestine meeting of insiders is underway. Good luck, people. Most Americans out there don't know what the Bilderberg conferences are. They're held every year, and they're covered very extensively by Jim Tucker. Just Google Jim Tucker, and you'll find out all about the Bilderberg meetings, or just Wikipedia Bilderberger. You will find them. These guys are insane. They run our lives. Yes, a secret cabal of elitists that are also eugenicists. Eugenicists meaning they want to sterilize and control population. Sounds good? No. It doesn't work like that. They want to kill you is the other way to put it. They want to kill you and your children, and that's the world we live in. You don't like that? You don't want to believe that? Doesn't matter. What you believe is kind of irrelevant. The facts are we are under attack. Humanity worldwide is systematically being soft-killed and in some cases hard-killed. It doesn't end unless you stand up and end it. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
The Irish slave trade. The forgotten white slaves. The slaves that time forgot. Slavery is nothing new. in the world. It's been around for a long time, and seldom is it mentioned how this country began. We always hear about the unjust slavery that was done to Africans as they were brought over and later became African Americans. But what about the Irish Americans? Most people don't know that many of the white immigrants that came here, they came as slaves. Vast human cargo transported on tall British ships bound for the Americas. They were shipped by the hundreds of thousands and included men, women, and even the youngest of children. Whenever they rebelled or even disobeyed an order, they were punished in the hardest ways. Slave owners would hang their human property by their hands and set their hands or feet on fire as one form of punishment. They were burned alive and had their heads placed on pikes in the marketplace as a warning to other captives. We don't really need to go through all the gory details, do we? After all, we know all too well that the atrocities of the African slave trade. But are we talking about African slavery? King James II and Charles I led a continued effort to enslave the Irish. Britain's famed Oliver Cromwell furthered this practice of dehumanizing one's next-door neighbor. The Irish slave trade began when James II sold 30,000 Irish prisoners as slaves to the New World. His proclamation of 1625 required Irish political prisoners be sent overseas and sold to English settlers in the West Indies. By the mid-1600s, the Irish were the main slaves sold to Antigua and Montserrat. At that time, 70% of the total population of Montserrat were Irish slaves. Ireland quickly became the biggest source of human livestock for English merchants. The majority of the early slaves to the New World were actually white. From 1641 to 1652, over 500,000 Irish were killed by the English, and another 300,000 were sold as slaves. I mean, this isn't a competition. It's not a, I'm not mentioning this to say we always hear about the horrible injustice done to African Americans, and I don't mean to outdo or belittle the horrors that they experienced, the courage and valor that they demonstrated in overcoming their slavery and eventually becoming free people in this country. But are we really free anymore? Well, white slavery continued from 1641 to 1652. Over 500,000 Irish were killed by the English and another 300,000 sold as slaves. Ireland's population fell from about 1,500,000 to 600,000 in one single decade. Families were ripped apart as the British did not allow Irish dads to take their wives and children with them across the Atlantic. This led to a helpless population of homeless women and children. Britain's solution was to auction them off as well. During the 1650s, over 100,000 Irish children between the ages of 10 and 14 were taken from their parents and sold as slaves in the West Indies, Virginia, and New England. In this decade, 52,000 Irish, mostly women and children, were sold to Barbados and Virginia. Another 30,000 Irish men and women were also transported and sold to the highest bidder. In 1656, Cromwell ordered that 2,000 Irish children be taken to Jamaica and sold as slaves to English settlers. Many people today will avoid calling the Irish slaves what they truly were, slaves. They'll come up with terms like indentured servants to describe what occurred to the Irish. However, in most cases from the 17th and 18th centuries, Irish slaves were nothing more than human cattle. As an example, the African slave trade was just beginning during this same time period. It is well recorded that African slaves, not tainted with the stain of the hated Catholic theology and more expensive to purchase, were often treated far better than their Irish counterparts. African slaves were very expensive during the late 1600s. They cost about 50 sterling. Irish slaves came cheap, no more than 5 sterling. If a planter whipped or branded or beat an Irish slave to death, it was never a crime. A death was a monetary setback, but far cheaper than killing a more expensive African. The English masters quickly began breeding the Irish women for both their own personal pleasure and for greater profit. Children of slaves were themselves slaves. which increased the size of the master's free workforce. Even if an Irish woman somehow obtained her freedom, her kids would remain slaves of her master. Thus, Irish moms, even with this newfound emancipation, would seldom abandon their kids and would remain in servitude. There's little question that the Irish experienced the horrors of slavery as much, if not more, in the 17th century as the Africans did. There is also very little question that those brown, tan faces you witness in your travels to the West Indies are very likely a combination of African and Irish ancestry. In 1839, Britain finally decided on its own to end its participation in Satan's highway to hell and stop transporting slaves. While their decision did not stop pirates from doing what they desired, the new law slowly concluded this chapter of nightmarish Irish misery. But if anyone, black or white, believes that slavery was only an African experience, then they've got it completely wrong. Irish slavery is a subject worth remembering, not erasing from our memories. But where are our public and private schools? Where are the history books? Why is it so seldom discussed? Do the memories of hundreds of thousands of Irish victims merit more than a mention from an unknown writer? Or is their story to be one that their English pirates intended? They intended to have the Irish story utterly and completely disappear as if it never happened. None of the Irish victims ever made it back to their homeland to describe their ordeal. These are the lost slaves, the ones that time and biased history books conveniently forgot. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You've been listening to Breaking Down the News. Take care, and we will see you back Friday at 3:30. Good day. Breaking Down the News is a program on riverwestradio.com, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3:30 p.m.